A nurse has no right to treat without a doctor's order. You just violated protocol. The hospital director roared in front of everyone. Clara stood still, her hands pressing a bandage over the wound of the old man in the faded military jacket. That afternoon, 6 black SUVs pulled up at the hospital gate and men in uniform stepped out, their eyes sharp and cold. Who was that old man? And what could make an entire Marine unit bow to a suspended nurse? Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Clara Jensen, 4 veteran nurse at East Ridge Medical Center in Tennessee, was known for 3 things: her blonde ponytail, the red pen always clipped to her pocket, and her unwavering dedication to patients. Her colleagues often whispered about her behind nurses' stations. Try hard, some called her Saint Clara, others said with thinly veiled contempt. But patients requested her by name, appreciating how she remembered their grandchildren's names, or held their hands during difficult procedures. Clara lived alone in a modest apartment 15 minutes from the hospital. She had chosen nursing after caring for her father during his final battle with stage 4 lung cancer. "You have healing hands," he had told her before he died. Those words became her anchor through grueling night shifts and thankless days. Tuesday started like any other day. Clara had just finished documenting a patient's vitals when commotion erupted at the emergency room entrance. An elderly man, perhaps 65 to 70, staggered through the sliding doors. His faded military jacket hung loosely on his thin frame, blood seeped through his left sleeve and his face glistened with sweat. His eyes darted around the room, unfocused and disoriented. "Sir, you need to register," the receptionist called out. "Do you have insurance? Identification?" The man patted his pockets with his uninjured hand but produced nothing. "I'm sorry, but without insurance or ID," Clara approached before the receptionist could finish. "Sir, let me help you," she said, guiding him toward a side room. "Nancy, call Dr. Vega, please." Nancy, the receptionist, hesitated. "He hasn't been processed yet. He's bleeding," Clara replied. "Let's get him stabilized, then worry about paperwork." In the emergency assessment room, Clara helped the man onto the bed. His breathing was labored, his skin clammy. The wound on his arm wasn't deep, but infection had clearly set in. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" Clara asked, gathering supplies. "Joseph," he managed. "Just Joseph." Clara called for a doctor 3 times. Each time she was told they were busy with registered patients. Dr. Raymond even walked past, glanced in, and continued down the hallway without stopping. The man's condition was deteriorating, his blood pressure dropped, and the infection needed immediate attention. Clara stood at the crossroads of protocol in her oath to care. She thought of her father, how his eyes had held the same lost look in his final days, how the hospice nurse had broken protocol to give him extra pain medication when he needed it most. "Clara, you can't touch him," warned Naomi, another nurse who peered into the room. "No doctor's orders, no treatment. You know the rules." Clara bit her lip, hesitating. Then she made her decision. Working methodically, she cleaned the wound, prepared antibiotics, and started an IV drip. Her training took over. 15 years of experience guiding her hands. Someone took photos, probably Naomi. A doctor watching from the hallway shook his head and walked away. When Joseph finally stabilized, his eyes cleared momentarily. "I only need a few hours," he whispered. "Then I'll go." "Thank you." Clara smiled reassuringly. "You don't need to go anywhere. You're safe here." Just then, Sandra Monroe, the hospital's senior administrator, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes widened at the sight of the unauthorized IV drip. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, voice rising with each word. "A nurse cannot provide treatment without authorization. You've just violated protocol." Clara didn't move, her hands still firmly holding the fresh bandage on Joseph's arm. "This patient needed immediate care," she said calmly. "That is not your decision to make." Sandra's face reddened. "Security cameras caught everything. My office." Now, as Clara was escorted out, Joseph grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Remember," he whispered, "they'll come." She didn't understand what he meant, but 15 minutes later, as she sat before Sandra and the hospital board, she understood that her career hung in the balance. 15 years of service, Sandra said coldly, thrown away because you couldn't follow basic protocol. The security footage played on the conference room screen. Clara watched herself treating Joseph against regulations. Evidence of her guilt broadcast in high definition. If you've ever seen someone punished for doing what's right, keep watching. While changing Joseph into a hospital gown before being summoned to administration, Clara had noticed something unusual. A faded eagle tattoo spread across his chest, the emblem of the Marine Corps. More telling were the shrapnel scars dotting his right arm, not fresh wounds, but old battles etched permanently into his skin. As she had helped him into the bed, a news segment about Afghanistan had flashed on the TV. Joseph's reaction was instant and visceral. His pulse spiked, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes fixed on the screen with haunted intensity. Not the typical response of an ordinary veteran. By afternoon, the consequences for Clara cascaded like dominoes. She received formal notice of temporary suspension. No pay, no patient contact. Her security badge was confiscated at the exit. A final humiliation as she carried her personal items in a cardboard box to her car. In the parking lot, nurses she'd worked alongside for years averted their eye. Only Layla, a young nurse in her second year, approached. "What you did was brave," she said quietly. "Or stupid," Clara replied with a tired smile. "Depends who you ask." At home, Clara discovered the damage had spread beyond the hospital. An anonymous post had gone viral. Security footage of her treating Joseph, edited to make her appear reckless and insubordinate. The comments were brutal. "Fire her. Playing doctor should be illegal. Who does she think she is?" Her mother called, voice strained with worry. "Honey, not again. You always get in trouble for helping too much." "What was I supposed to do, Mom? Let him suffer. There are rules for a reason, Gracie." It wasn't the first time Clara had bent rules. During the height of COVID, she'd smuggled an iPad to an isolated patient, so they could say goodbye to family. Last year, she'd stayed 4 hours after her shift to sit with a teenage girl awaiting psychiatric placement when no beds were available. Each time, she'd been reprimanded but never suspended. As Clara hung up, she noticed something in her scrub pocket. A small object Joseph had pressed into her palm before security arrived. A tarnished silver badge, small but heavy, its edges worn smooth by years of handling. "If anything happens, keep this," he had murmured. "They'll know." "Who will know?" she had asked. He'd only smiled faintly, closed his eyes and said no more. Now examining the badge under her kitchen light, Clara noticed an inscription on the back. Maddox Class 1968. Nothing else. No military branch, no serial number, nothing to identify its owner. Curious, Clara searched online for Maddox and military in 19. The results were sparse, but one entry caught her attention. A Colonel Owen Maddox reported missing in action in 2005 during a classified operation in the Middle East. Presumed dead after 2 years without contact. The grainy photograph showed a younger, sharper version of Joseph's face. "That's impossible," Clara whispered. The dates didn't add up. If this was the same man, he would have been in his 70s when he went missing. Well past active duty age. As she dug deeper, her laptop suddenly froze. When it rebooted, her search history was gone. Minutes later, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Do you know who you saved today?" Clara bolted upright, moving to her window. Parked exactly 100 meters from her apartment was a black SUV. Its engine run. As she watched, it pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the night. Sleep eluded her. The badge felt inexplicably heavy on her nightstand, as if it contained more than metal, as if it held secrets. Morning brought more bad news. An official letter requesting her presence at a disciplinary hearing. Her bank notifying her that her account had been temporarily frozen, due to suspicious activity. She had used her personal credit card to purchase medical supplies for Joseph, when the hospital inventory system locked her out. Social media had turned even uglier. Someone had doxed her, posting her address and phone number. The nurse who thinks she's above the law became a trending topic locally. Former patients defended her, but their voices were drowned out by the outrage machine. By noon, Clara seriously considered leaving medicine altogether. 15 years of service. And for what? To be vilified for helping someone in need. She was gathering her nursing certifications, preparing her resume for a job far from healthcare, when her doorbell rang. On her porch stood a man in an impeccable dark suit, clean-cut, expressionless, with the unmistakable bearing of military. Behind him, parked at the curb, was another black SUV. "Miss Jensen," he said. "Not a question but a confirmation. Your presence is requested." "By who?" Clara asked, one hand instinctively closing around the badge in her pocket. "By people who understand what happened yesterday." He handed her a sealed envelope. "Your country needs you to come with us now." Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Joseph, but younger, standing beside a helicopter. Written across the back, "Maddox, 1968, Operation Kingfisher." "Is he alive?" Clara asked. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us, All your questions will be answered. As the SUV drove her through unfamiliar streets, Clara realized she had made a decision yesterday that reached far beyond hospital protocol. She had saved someone important, someone whose very existence seemed to be classified information. The SUV stopped at an airfield, where a small jet waited. As Clara boarded, she wondered what kind of veteran inspired this level of secrecy and protection, and why of all the hospitals in Tennessee, had he stumbled into hers. Have you ever wondered what happens when an ordinary act of kindness collides with extraordinary circumstance? Keep watching to see how one nurse's compassion unraveled decades of secrets. The next morning, while Clara was still missing, unreachable by phone, absent from her apartment, East Ridge Medical Center continued its routine operations. Staff gossiped about her absence at the disciplinary hearing. Rumors spread she'd fled town, had a nervous breakdown, or worse. Sandra Monroe, the administrator who had suspended Clara, received multiple calls from the hospital's legal team. The viral video had created a public relations nightmare, with opinions sharply divided. Veterans groups were organizing a protest for later that day, while medical professionals debated proper protocol versus compassionate care on morning talk shows. This nurse broke every rule in the book, argued a hospital administrator from another facility. Medicine requires order and procedure. Sometimes compassion supersedes procedure, countered a veteran doctor. What's the point of medicine if not to heal? The debate raged online, with hashtags both supporting and condemning Clara. Journalists contacted former patients, who universally praised her dedication. Her empty apartment became something of a pilgrimage site for local veterans, who left notes and flowers at her door. At the hospital, Sandra Monroe called an emergency staff meeting to address the situation. We cannot have employees freelancing medical care, she insisted. While Nurse Miller's intentions may have been good, her actions endangered a patient and violated core protocols. A young resident physician raised his hand. With all due respect, ma'am, the patient was in distress and actively being denied care. There are proper channels, Sandra replied firmly. This is not a battlefield hospital. We have standards. At 4:37 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The low rumble of engines drew attention to the hospital's main entrance. 6 identical black SUVs arrived in perfect formation, parking in a semicircle outside the main doors. Hospital security stepped forward, then hesitated as men and women in Marine Corps dressed uniforms emerged from the vehicles. Their precision movements suggested military discipline of the highest order. Patients and visitors pressed against windows. Staff members paused mid-stride, clipboards and charts forgotten in their hands. What in the world? Whispered a nurse at the second-floor station. Those are Marines, replied an orderly. Full dress uniform. A distinguished officer led the group through the automatic doors, carrying a leather portfolio. The reception desk fell silent as he approached. I need to speak with Sandra Monroe and the hospital board, immediately. Sir, do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, voice faltering under his steady gaze. No, ma'am, but they'll want to see me. He placed a government ID on the counter. Major Adrian Wolf, United States Marine Corps Special Intelligence Division. It concerns Nurse Clara Jensen. The name rippled through the lobby like electricity. Phones emerged, capturing video. Someone alerted local media. Within 30 minutes, news vans clogged the parking lot. Reporters jostling for position outside. Major Wolf didn't acknowledge questions. Standing at parade rest, waiting, his posture and expression conveyed absolute certainty. This was a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. Sandra Monroe emerged from the elevator, flanked by 2 board members and the hospital's legal counsel. Her usual confidence wavered at the sight of uniformed Marines standing at parade rest in her lobby. Major Wolf, she began extending her hand. This is highly irregular. Miss Monroe, he interrupted, ignoring her hand. Yesterday at approximately 11, one of your nurses provided life-saving care to a patient who was denied treatment due to lack of identification. That patient was Colonel Owen Maddox. Murmurs swept through the growing crowd. The name may not mean anything to you, Major Wolf continued, but to us, he is a national asset, whose existence has been classified at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades. He opened his portfolio, displaying documents stamped with government seals. Colonel Maddox was not missing in action. As officially reported, he was conducting deep cover operations that saved countless American lives. His death was falsified to protect his identity and the integrity of his mission.
Sandra's face paled. We had no way of knowing precisely, Major Wolf cut in. You had no way of knowing, but Clara Jensen didn't need to know. She simply saw a human being in distress, and acted with courage and compassion, qualities apparently in short supply in your institution. The crowd grew as hospital staff abandoned their stations to witness the confrontation. Layla, the young nurse who had supported Clara, pushed to the front, recording everything on her phone. Colonel Maddox was entering the final phase of his mission, returning with intelligence that will ensure the safety of deployed troops in 3 conflict zones. Had he died from that infected wound, 2 decades of work would have died with him. The major's voice grew harder. Due to injuries sustained in the field, he was unable to identify himself or his status. The sepsis from his untreated wound had begun affecting his cognitive function. Despite this, your institution denied him care based purely on administrative requirement. Major Wolf turned to address the cameras now filming the exchange. Nurse Miller didn't just treat a patient. She unknowingly preserved national security interests that I cannot fully disclose in this setting. He produced a formal document. This is a summons requiring your hospital to issue a public apology to Nurse Miller, reinstate her with full back pay and benefits, and rescind all disciplinary actions. Sandra accepted the paper with trembling hands. Of course, if this is a matter of national security, it's a matter of basic humanity, Major Wolf corrected. The security implications only underscore the magnitude of her service. A commotion at the hospital entrance drew all eyes. Clara entered, escorted by 2 Marines. She looked exhausted but composed, her blonde hair pulled back in her characteristic ponytail. Behind her walked Joseph, Colonel Maddox, now dressed in civilian clothes, his arm properly bandaged. The hospital staff parted like the Red Sea. Colleagues who had shunned Clara now stared in astonishment. Naomi, who had photographed Clara breaking protocols, slipped quietly toward the back of the crowd. Clara, Sandra began awkwardly, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Monroe, Major Wolf interrupted. The United States government requires more than equivocation. A formal public apology now. Under the unrelenting gaze of Marines and the unblinking eye of news cameras, Sandra's corporate facade crumbled. Nurse Miller, on behalf of East Ridge Medical Center, I sincerely apologize for the unjust treatment you received. Your actions exemplify the highest ideals of healthcare. We were wrong to suspend you, and we ask you to return to your position with our deepest respect. Clara's expression remained neutral. I'll need some time to consider. Colonel Maddox stepped forward. Though still weakened, his military bearing was unmistakable. This woman didn't just save my life, she preserved information that will save hundreds more. While your hospital denied me care based on paperwork, she saw a human being in need. That's the foundation of medicine, isn't it? His quiet authority silenced the room. I've spent 20 years in deep cover, witnessing both the worst and best of humanity. Yesterday, I saw the best in Nurse Miller. 1 week later, Clara found herself in a place she never imagined visiting. The Pentagon. In a private ceremony attended by high-ranking military officials, she received a Civilian Service Medal and a personal letter of gratitude from the Secretary of Defense. The intelligence Colonel Maddox gathered will restructure our entire approach to counter-terrorism in North Africa. An official explained, had he died from that infection, it would have died with him. After the ceremony, Colonel Maddox, now dressed in a simple gray suit rather than his Marine uniform, approached Clara. 20 years ago, I volunteered for a mission that required me to disappear completely, he explained. My wife died believing I was killed in action. My children grew up without me. He showed her a photograph of his family, 3 children now grown, with families of their own. I'm meeting my grandchildren, for the first time next week. I exist because of you. I just did what any nurse would do. Clara replied. No, Maddox said firmly. Most followed rules. You followed your conscience. That's far rarer than you think. He embraced her awkwardly, still mindful of his healing arm. Thank you for allowing me to finish my mission, and finally tell the truth. Clara's simple response captured everything. I just did what was right, sir. When Clara returned to Lincoln Memorial, everything had changed. The story had made national headlines. Nurse suspended for treating veteran revealed as covert operative. The hospital board appointed her head of emergency nursing for the night shift. Former critics now regarded her with a mixture of respect and weariness. But the most profound change wasn't in how others saw her, it was in how she saw herself. For years, Clara had wondered if her father's words about healing hands were merely the comfort of a dying man to his daughter. Now she understood that healing went beyond medical procedures. Sometimes it meant having the courage to stand alone. Have you ever seen someone vindicated in a way no one could have imagined? Type courage if you believe that doing what's right will always be recognized, sometimes in ways we never expect. Clara returned to East Ridge Medical Center, but not as the same person who had been escorted out in disgrace. With her new position as head emergency nurse for the night shift, came respect, not demanded but freely given. Colleagues who once whispered behind her back now sought her guidance. The red pen still clipped to her pocket became something of a symbol among newer nurses. Be like Clara. Follow the patient, not just the protocol. Each afternoon before her shift, Clara would sit at the corner cafe, reading medical journals, or sometimes writing handwritten letters to Colonel Maddox. Though his location remained classified, their connection endured, a bond forged in a moment of crisis that had altered both their lives. The silver badge now rested in a small frame on her office desk. Beside it stood a handwritten note: "Not all who wear white coats simply follow orders. Some dare to do what's right." 3 months after the incident, Clara received an unexpected package. Inside was an essay written by a 12-year-old boy, Colonel Maddox's grandson, whom he had finally met. The essay, titled "The Nurse Who Made My Grandfather Cry," had won the state's Youth Literature Prize. The boy had witnessed their reunion, and written about watching his mother meet her father, a man she had believed dead for 2 decades. He described how his strong, serious grandfather had broken down in tears while telling them about the nurse who had saved him when no one else would help. "My grandfather says heroes don't always wear uniforms," the boy wrote. "Sometimes they wear scrubs and carry red pens and do the right thing even when it's hard." The essay now hung framed in the emergency department's main hallway, a reminder to all staff that their actions could reach far beyond the hospital wall. Each evening, Clara now walks the quiet halls of East Ridge Medical Center, not as a rebel nurse, but as a symbol of something far deeper: the fierce grace of those who act when no one else will. The silver badge stays framed on her desk, but the truer reward is intangible. It's every patient treated without fear, every nurse who now knows compassion has power, and every soul reminded that a single voice can echo into history. In her final interview with national media, Clara looked directly into the camera when asked what advice she would give to healthcare workers facing similar dilemmas. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she said simply. "I just chose not to look away when someone was drowning. That's all any of us can do. Refuse to look away when we have the power to help." The investigation into Colonel Maddox's classified work continued to reveal intelligence that protected American interests abroad. Lives were saved, threats neutralized, all because a nurse had chosen compassion over protocol. The closing text of the news segment read, "Kindness needs no recognition, but it is always remembered. Even one small act of kindness can change a bad day, a life, and sometimes the entire world." Share an act of kindness you received that you'll never forget. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where kindness spreads every day. Remember, hitting like isn't just for the video, but for the truly worthy people in life.